Hi, this is a message to the BBC really, and obviously to raise awareness among the UK public about the severity of the risks that we are facing right now as a population. And the BBC is culpable and actually complicit in assisting with what amounts to propaganda. And propaganda is dangerous. Why? Because why does propaganda need to be used unless to deceive the public? And why would the public need to be deceived unless the people trying to deceive the public have nefarious agendas to roll out? Now, I've recently written this addressing the trials and tribulations of COVID-19, and it is a really important piece of work in the sense of the information that it shares. I'm not saying it's brilliantly written or professionally presented even. I'm not a professional journalist. I work specifically for my fellow UK and global citizens. But the information shared in here is very important. The information that's shared just by the links, you know, if you don't bother to read the article itself and just click on the links, really gives a very good idea of what people really need to know and the kind of questions that we need to be asking. Like, for example, you know, the 5G rollout, the whole thing about this COVID-19 and how it's being tested, and how accurate are the figures that news organisations like the BBC are rolling out every day as to people who've died of COVID-19, when it turns out vast amounts of them have probably died with COVID-19, that it's not actually COVID-19 that's killed them, or even why they've ended up in hospital in the first place. And the idea that you can test for markers, specific markers for a virus that I haven't seen it isolated. I have not been presented even with the mechanism as to how it works, you know, because we have to see the mechanism. All right, here's the virus, show us the virus, and then show us the mechanism of how it works, say, any differently to SARS-CoV-2. You see, are we dealing with a milder form of SARS-CoV-2? Is this a variation that has been identified in just recently, in 2019? And how is this being exploited to the extent that we find that suddenly our human rights are scrapped by this dubiously titled coronavirus bill, which, you know, this article here thoroughly addresses in terms of its errors, its just total, well, it just totally trashes the golden rule of law. And the golden rule of law is established precisely to protect matters that are foundations of public policy. And one of the foundations, or perhaps we could say in a democracy, the foundation of public policy is our human rights. And, you know, a prisoner has human rights, and so do we, the people, have human rights. And dealing with a virus should not at all impact on our human rights, except apparently it can. And recently I've been seeing military people giving speeches about coronavirus, and it's like, sorry, what has the military got to do with a pandemic? People aren't stupid. You know, if you ask people to stay in their homes if they're sick or have tested positive for coronavirus, the vast majority of people will do that. And the people that are being asked to stay in their homes do need an income. And if they're losing their businesses because of that and their jobs, then this is a serious matter and it will kill people. You know, people die under stress, people die through ill health that's caused by poverty itself, and also then left dependent on an impoverished NHS to treat them. Children are impacted terribly by poverty. The UN just in the last couple of days has come forward and expressed their concerns that actually the methods of addressing COVID-19, the current methods, have put millions of children's lives at risk. Millions of children's lives are now at risk, on the line, precisely because of the manner in which this COVID-19 has been addressed. That, according to the evidence, does appear to be in the interest of protecting the 1%. And the 1% that, you know, Vandana Shiva now is challenging. She's calling for a challenge. Because how can we accept rule by Bill Gates and all the people who stand with Bill Gates? They all might as well be Bill Gates. And Bill Gates may as well be Boris Johnson or Donald Trump. And, you know, we are dealing with a corporate coup. That is what we have been dealing with. Since Thatcher, they've been operating like by stealth, slowly nibbling away at all our rights, our social structures, our institutions of law especially have been under heavy attack. There are far too many people in offices of power in countries like Britain and America that are heavily compromised through corruption and crime and all kinds, and the resulting coercion. We need to accept that. Epstein is a prime example of what has been going on behind the scenes. And we know the same thing has been going on in Britain. So, you know, when we're dealing with this level of crime, how does it come about that they can move these criminals from strength to strength to strength over decades from Thatcher? How can they do that when within a democracy, with an allegedly free press, that is bound to these codes of conduct? So, you know, at all times, a journalist upholds and defends the principle of media freedom, the right of freedom of expression and the right of the public to be informed. Strives to ensure that information disseminated is honestly conveyed, accurate and fair. Does her utmost to correct harmful inaccuracies. Differentiates between fact and opinion. Obtains material by honest, straightforward and open means, with the exception of investigations that are both overwhelmingly in the public interest and which involve evidence that cannot be obtained by straightforward means. Okay, so it's like, yeah, they're allowed to use straightforward and open means, but sometimes leaks. Because by the law of necessity, that the public needs to know, you see. So sometimes maybe going against government narratives, dealing with people like dealing with organisations like WikiLeaks, for example. And we all know what's happened to Julian Assange, that the BBC seems to have just ignored, really. does nothing to intrude into anybody's private life, grief or distress unless justified by overriding consideration of the public interest, protects the identity of sources who supply information in confidence and material gathered in the course of her work, resists threats of any other inducements to influence, distort or suppress information, and takes no unfair personal advantage of information gained in the course of his duties before the information is public knowledge. So, therefore, does not distort or suppress information. Produces no material likely to lead to hatred or discrimination on grounds of a person's age, gender, race, colour, creed, legal status, disability, marital status or sexual orientation. Does not by way of statement, voice or appearance endorse by advertisement any commercial product or service save for the promotion of his own work or of the medium by which he is employed. A journalist shall normally seek the consent of an appropriate adult when interviewing or photographing a child or a story about his welfare. Avoids plagiarism. Well, the BBC really has totally scrapped this. They're journalists. I'm sorry, you have scrapped the NUJ codes of conduct. You are not following them. You are continuing to support propaganda and narrative. And it is putting lives at risk. And, you know, there's stuff like 5G, there's Bill Gates, the BBC is now promoting. I'm sorry, who is Bill Gates? He's a computer software salesman. That is what he is. He happens to be a multi-billionaire because of the corrupt system that we presently, well, the corrupt economic system that we presently operate in, where a few people like him can rise to the top on the backs of basically a wage slave workforce. And the same people like him that are benefiting most from that are then dictating to and controlling our governments. Who is he to discuss against the global fight against coronavirus? Who is he? Why should he speak for humanity? And what does he really know? Who is it? Why is the BBC feeding the British public his propaganda about vaccinations? When, with all the questions that are arising about vaccinations. And, you know, this was Chris EXLEY speaking with Del Bigtree at the HIGHWIRE a couple of years ago. And, you know, I'm in contact personally with Christopher EXLEY. Absolutely amazing guy. A professor working at Keele University. He published his 35-year study on the impacts of aluminium in the human brain and life itself, living organisms. And he's come to some very startling conclusions and presents some very strong evidence that does specifically connect aluminium adjuvant in vaccines directly to autism. And that's through studying brain tissue and vaccination sites and what happens there, and how it is that very small amounts of aluminium, even the tiny trace amounts that are in vaccines, when you're piling them vaccines up on top of each other, they are passing through the system and getting right directly into the brain. Now, he's already made the connection between aluminium in the brain tissue and Alzheimer's, and how is it affecting young children then? And then we even have here, if I can find the link, Robert DeNiro here, he is explaining, I'm just going to play you this clip from the Today programme, and, you know, he's asking questions about it, and it is very concerning that a film asking questions about vaccines and the connection with autism, you know, it was removed from the film festival because of the amount of pressure that was brought in, and this was a film festival that was actually, well, it was established by DeNiro.
Tell a good story, then forget it.
There was a bit of controversy, some headlines at the beginning of this year's festival when it was announced that this film called Vaxxed would be screened at the festival. Later, the festival pulled it. Was it because of the backlash? Were you surprised that people reacted the way that they did?
I was shooting a movie. I was in the middle of a lot of stuff. I think the movie is something that people should see. There was a backlash which I haven't fully explored, and I will. And I didn't want it to start affecting the festival in ways that I couldn't see. But definitely there's something to that movie. And there's another movie called Trace Amounts. And there's a lot of information about things that are happening with the CDC, the pharmaceutical companies. There's a lot of things that are not said. I, as a parent of a child who has autism, I'm concerned. And I want to know the truth. And I'm not anti-vaccine. I want safe vaccines. When you get, some people can't get a certain type of shot, and they can die from it. You know, even penicillin. So why should that not be with vaccine, which it isn't?
So you said, you went public for the first time saying that your 18-year-old son does have autism.
Yes.
That had been a very private thing for you. And
Yes.
part of the reason you wanted this film shown was to start that conversation.
Absolutely.
Do you believe you'll now have a role in that conversation going forward?
Possibly, yes. Because the thing is that to shut it down, there's no reason to. If you're scientists, let's see, let's hear. Everybody doesn't seem to want to hear much about it. It's shut down. And you guys are the ones that should be the investigating. Do the investigating.
I think the film was controversial because people felt that the...
So, you know, there you have Robert De Niro here saying exactly what I'm saying and have said on previous occasions to especially the big news providers and especially the BBC, which is funded directly by the UK public through licence fee. And therefore we require and need the BBC to present news honestly. That why is it that somebody like Professor Christopher EXLEY here, who has spent 35 years studying on a very low budget because nobody wants studies into the impacts of aluminium on human health because it's such a big corporate product and is so widely used by the pharmaceutical industry in vaccines. And there's all kinds of money interests now connected directly to these vaccines and to aluminium itself as a product that is used, well, for packaging human food. Why does he have to appear on Del Bigtree as an alternative news provider? Why hasn't he been on the BBC? Why hasn't he been invited onto Question Time? Why haven't there been questions about vaccinations and how safe are they? Because the BBC has totally ignored this, the NIJJ Code of Conduct, or is it the NUJ? I'm dyslexic, I find it hard to read certain words when they're put together like that. But why? Why? And why have you got away with it for so long? I mean, I complained about what you'd said about Fukushima and giving false radiation readings and advising people to go and live in an area that was going to bombard, say, a pregnant woman with the equivalent of 260 chest x-rays a year and expecting children to grow up in that, and never mind about the plutonium dust. We're sick of it. We're sick of you, BBC. We're sick of your lies and putting people's lives at risk and giving a platform to people like this, the kind of people who attack Jeremy Corbyn, you know, and no platform for this lady. You know, this again has to be covered on, you know, another alternative news platform about how Labour has been attacking itself from within, attacking the people's choice, the democratic choice of leader from members of the Labour Party. How we have been robbed of our leader, our party put on what they're calling a centrist track, when actually it's Jeremy Corbyn who's centrist. Because, you know, if you're getting onto the hard left, you're going into Soviet communism, you know, it does come full circle to the point, well, what's the choice there? What is the difference between Soviet communism and corporate communism? There is no difference. Both of them strip people of their human rights. Both of them amount to people being wage slaves, captives within a police state where everything's suppressed and people aren't allowed to speak out. I mean, according to this bill, nobody's allowed to criticise the government. Any criticism of government policy is a summary public order offence until they end the state of emergency, liable to fine and imprisonment without trial. That is an act of terrorism. That is an act of terrorism. Since when does a virus you know, let's face it, we are not dealing with the bubonic plague. This is not even as bad as SARS-CoV-2 that had a 10% death rate on those that were infected. And even that, there were no lockdown, despite it spreading throughout the world. Oh, but suddenly, just at the point of a banking collapse, suddenly there is a lockdown. And you aren't asking any questions, and you have not informed the British public, and you've asked no questions about this bill. What are you as journalists? Are you incapable of reading through the coronavirus bill? Are you incapable of asking the legal questions that even a simple UK citizen, a simple carer like myself, is prepared to ask? What is wrong with you people? And how dare you sit back and allow us to face that level of a threat on the guise of protecting us and, you know, opening us up now to mandatory vaccinations and being tracked on our phone and even having marks on our arms possibly to show we've been vaccinated and we're safe from coronavirus. I mean, I'm sorry. This is outrageous. It is outrageous. And I am deeply disturbed that the British public are just swallowing it all. And people like myself, and I'm just a very small piece of the very tiny dot actually of the network among reputable alternative news providers who are asking questions. Like, for example, the last American Vagabond, Ryan. He does brilliant shows and he shares solid factual information. He does, you know, he's not a conspiracy theorist. Ben Swan is not a conspiracy theorist. Del Bigtree is not. These people are presenting facts, while you, BBC, are presenting nothing but propaganda that is not even based on any facts. I mean, UK Column has shown conclusively, repeatedly, the facts of your own documents, as is shared in here. This is from the BBC. Previous flu pandemics. No lockdowns. No mention till 8 months later, even by the BBC. And now we're being shown suddenly after UK Column, the day after UK Column explains that, look, we're not even at the highest, the worst cases of flu pandemic we've experienced in the past. Suddenly, oh, it's jumped up even higher, and we're being told that these people have not died of COVID-19. We're being given false figures based on a very dubious test that actually it is giving false positives. And in some cases, the way that the system's working in Britain now is that the deaths are being doubled. From the actual number, from the true number, that you're reporting doubled figures. This is outrageous. It is outrageous. And especially, that nobody's asking any questions about the amount of children who have lost their lives through these vaccination programs that have been going on throughout the world, that have killed children. That now we very strongly suspect, with evidence, because of research done like the renowned Professor Christopher EXLEY, normally when somebody like him produces the results of a 35-year study, it does get featured in the press. But his study was ignored by the BBC. Why? Why did you ignore Christopher EXLEY's study? Why was it instead he was receiving death threats? As he explains in his blog on the issue. And the fact, asking himself why no media covered it. Because this is a corporate coup. Because actually, more important than the British people, according to the BBC, are the interests of Bill Gates, are the interests of the global corporations, are the interests of the pharmaceutical industry. You aren't bothered about our health. And even facilitating attack against our democracy. That's a very serious matter of what has happened to Jeremy Corbyn, what has happened to the Labour Party, and these people, Blairites, taking over it, calling themselves centrists, when actually they're not. They're centre-right is what they are. Centre-right. Jeremy Corbyn was centre-left, and it's time this world woke up to that fact. Norway is centre-left. Iceland is centre-left. Democratic socio-capitalism is centre-left. Hard left is your corporate communism, your Chinese communist state. That, by the way, suddenly it seems Britain can operate in exactly the same way as the Chinese communist state. And that's from a right-wing Tory government. And we need to ask questions about that. And if you, BBC, aren't doing it, we deserve to sue you for putting us at risk, for putting our children at risk, for lying to us, for supporting actual terrorists. All this stuff, this rollout of 5G that has not been tested, that countries like Sweden, for example, have decided to ban, have actually delayed it. Or was it Switzerland? I think it was Sweden. Switzerland. But other countries are. Brussels has done the same. Nobody is asking questions in any place that the bulk of the British public have confidence still in the BBC, unfortunately, and you are exploiting that by ignoring the things that people like Del Bigtree cover, that the Real News Network cover, that people like Ryan of Last American Vagabond cover. That you ignore the fact that still to this day the Palestinian people are under immense pressure. They're under attack. And why? Why are they being attacked? Why is it that when somebody, a British politician, speaks out on behalf of Palestinian people's human rights, people like the BBC, news medias of Britain all start attacking him and calling him anti-Semitic? Since when does being a Zionist give people the right to be anti-human? And that's who you are supporting, BBC. You are supporting the anti-human. And therefore, they may as well be the Antichrist, because we are a Christian country and Jesus supports the human being and our human rights, fundamentally. So we're dealing with an Antichrist, anti-human agenda. And you know, what's shared in here is very important, especially the attack against the elderly now. There's too many people, there's too many elderly, there's always too many of us. And it does need to end. And I do propose legal action against the BBC News itself for the risks that you've caused. Now it is coming to light that this pandemic, alleged pandemic, is actually nothing like what as it was originally forecast. The evidence is out there. I'll leave you the links to UK Column and various other facts about this COVID-19, if it even exists, because like I say, we still haven't seen the virus. We have not been shown the mechanism as to how it works. We have not been shown how it is any different from SARS-CoV-2. And we need more information than that before we start getting locked up in our homes, forced into bread queues. In preparation for what? Becoming dependent on America when we get Boris Johnson's hard Brexit. That nobody actually voted for because we were told, and you told us, BBC, there would be a deal. So, you know, I hope people wake up. I'm going to leave you these links, and I do ask you, you know, and especially do listen to this lady, Vandana Shiva. You know, what she's sharing there is exactly what I've explained in this document addressing the trials and tribulations of COVID. That we need people, we need hands on the land to heal this planet. It's not humanity that's destroying the planet. It is these big corporations. It only takes one corporation to destroy a Pacific Ocean, as we've witnessed it with Japan and Fukushima. Did the Japanese people beg for nuclear power after what they'd suffered? Did they? No, they did not. Who imposed it on them? I tell you now, the Bill Gates of this world. And if his vaccine kills masses of people, oh, what's going to happen? How long is it going to take before we get compensation? Or will it actually by then be a crime to even mention that it was caused by a vaccine? Is telling the truth, going, you know, sharing facts and information, is that a crime now? Is this video that I'm making here, does it constitute as criticism of the government? When actually I'm righteously utilising my freedom of speech and expression to stand up for my human rights and the human rights of my fellow human beings and actually all the life on this planet. The rights of Mother Earth. And as indeed Vandana Shiva is calling for and standing up for too. Because the rights of our planet are our rights. Rights are rights. And yes, let's have our centrist leader, okay, Jeremy Corbyn, centre left. We don't want no centre right Tory party governing Labour. It is an outrage and it is part of the coup. That is all part of the coup. And we're witnessing the exact same thing as happened in America. And that is cause for alarm too, because that is telling us this isn't just something that's happened in Britain. This is a global corporate agenda. And we have rights to question it when it is fundamentally threatening our human rights and putting our children's future on the line. Already, again, huge bailouts for these corrupt criminal financiers who've just squandered the last bailout while people have been dying in their tens of thousands, 200,000 in Britain alone. people thrown onto the streets. And they failed again, even with that huge bailout that has caused such mass suffering. And now you want to put another debt on top of that on the children of for how long? And it'll all quietly happen under cover of coronavirus while you've got everybody panicking about even standing closer than 6 feet to one another. No, no, no. This is outrageous, people, and if you are not going to stand up and speak out now, I'm sorry for what is coming, okay? It's going to be a shock to a lot of people. And why? Because you, BBC, you have been complicit and you have let us down. You are not worthy to be called a news organisation.